Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Uncommon Sense live stream. I'm Joshua Barnes, the founder of Process Mentors. And as always, I'm excited to be joined by Steve Tundon and Al Shalloway. Steve, if you want to take it away next.
Hello, friends of Herbie. From the deep woods where Herbie is taking his hikes, we will discuss this topic of Agile coaching.
Hi, and this is Al Shalloway. I'm Director of Thought Leadership at PMI. And this is my first one. I'm back in the Seattle area, actually Linwood, which is just north of Seattle. Came back here for family reasons, all good. But I wanted to say why I wanted to do this topic. What do Agile coaches need to know? And it actually kind of got inspired by something I did a long time ago. When I was at Net Objectives and Scott Bain, who's actually now at the PMI with me, were talking about what people needed to know. I asked the question, this was for technical, I asked the question, Scott, what would you want someone to know before you'd let them touch your code if we were doing a software project? And the inspiration for that question was a project I'd worked on a couple of years before where there was this tech lead who basically undid a lot of good stuff because he didn't know some concept that one of the other people did know. I mean, it was actually really good abstraction, and this guy went in there and basically made the code worse. It was unrefactoring, I suppose. And I've seen this before where somebody with some authority and arrogance thinks they know everything, and if they don't see why it's good, they would take it out. So it occurred to me, well, what would I want an Agile coach to know before I'd let him coach my team? And that's really basically the context for this question. And now I'm going to pass it back to Steve or Joshua.
Well, yeah. So as we were chatting a little bit before we went live today. One of the things that I was saying I feel pretty strongly about is just coaching, and I know Steve's going to chime in on this as well. But you don't hire a coach to play the game or to be a team member out on the field. You bring a coach in, or you have a coach to help the players grow and deliver better results. And I think that's one of the most important things as far as if you're bringing a coach into the organization, that's part of what you should expect. If you're a coach coming in, it's also what you should expect. So often I see, people in these individuals in these coaching roles, and they're like a team member. They're just doing work. They're not conveying what they know and upskilling the people they should be coaching, whether that's the team members, the stakeholders, other people that are, part of that value that is intended to be delivered. And I think that that's something that, as if you're in a PMO, you're in a position where you're interviewing people for a coaching role. Well, that's some of what you should glean from the discussion before they come in, is how would they approach that? What are their expectations of what they'd be doing? And Steve, I know you had a few thoughts on this.
That's right. Only a few, because I think I am not qualified at all to cover this topic, because I'm not into coaching, not even into training. No, that's like the drawback of always being on the field and resolving problems. You don't have time to get into these kinds of topics. But I have a few reflections. Now, when I hear the word coaching, given the current big event of the Olympic Games, the first things that comes to mind, now, do you see any one of these high-performing athletes that do amazing things who is there without a coach? Yes, there is one exception. I might get back to that later. But in general, no, all of them have a coach. So there must be a reason why high-performing athletes resort to coaches. And I think that reflection should bring us also to the reality of organizational development. If an organization wants to become high-performing, well, they need to know what it takes to get there. And maybe, I just say maybe, coaching is one of the ways to realize that. I have many other things, but let's hear Al. I know you have many things to say, Al.
Yeah, well, I've done coaching for a long time, and I think there are more myths about coaching than there is reality about coaching. Even what a coach is a big question. I keep hearing a lot of people say, "Oh, coaches never, they never tell anybody what to do, and they never," or which actually I don't tell people what to do, but they have kind of the wrong reason, or you just let people figure it out. I actually would like to talk about that, telling people what to do. It doesn't work, but not for the reason everyone gives. I have never been in a situation where if I told them what to do, they wouldn't do it. Where they are, there have been situations. I should say that most of the situations I'm in where I've got a good rapport, they're actually looking at me to tell them what to do, but I don't. And the reason is not because they'll resist it. The reason is because if I tell them what to do, they won't have worked through all the little steps, or there'll be some principles that I know. Jim Trott calls this the curse of knowledge. Like I just know things and I don't even think about it. I tend to think sometimes everybody knows them, but they don't. So if you tell somebody to do something, the danger is you might see something that they don't see, even though they believe what you said makes sense. And the danger with that is then they'll say, "Oh yeah, Al said do this, makes total sense. Let's go do it." And then they go try do it. I'm not there. They make some mistake. They don't see it because I left something out. Not intentionally, I just didn't think about it. And then it fails. And then they blame me rightfully. They'll blame me for being wrong. But the reality is the blame is due because I didn't get them to see what they needed to do. So when I coach, what I do is I often see a better solution well before they will see a solution. And I mean, it's more that I have better experience or longer experience, but also that I've built this model, this way to look at problems, this way to see what's needed. And out of that, I can discern the solution quicker. But what I'll do then is I'll ask questions based on their belief system. If it's clear they've said something, like I remember one guy, this was a tech coaching, but he said, "Oh, he likes one big, large class because then he can see everything that's there." Well, my God, this is breaking what's called cohesion. He's got weak cohesion. Everything's coupled. It's a disaster. But I don't say that. I don't say this is bad. Oh, horrible. I mean, it is bad. It is horrible. But instead, I ask him some questions. I said, "Okay, well, what does that lead to?" He says, "Well, can you see it at the beginning, right?" And he says, "Yeah, yeah." And then he tells me how he goes in and he can see it. But after a while, if he comes, so I might ask him, "Well, 6 months later, what happens?" He says, "Well, then I don't remember." What if somebody else comes in? So if you know what the problem is, you can ask questions so they discover what the problems are. And then as you coach them, you can guide them to a solution that makes sense. And then they understand it because they figured it out. You just ask good questions. By the way, if you're wrong, which happens, then you won't be able to guide them to the wrong solution because they'll be thinking, so no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. So it's always a combination of taking your experience, taking what you know, trying to add that to the person you're coaching, and then working in partnership that way. Hand it back.
Yeah. So, and I'll say, like Al.
Oops.
Joshua disappeared. So, well, let's me maybe.
Oh, he's back.
Joshua, you're back. Okay, what's happened there?
Yeah, I've got a terrible storm here, so I think I have two internet connections. I think I just lost one of them in the failover. Fortunately, jumped in. Yeah, I was getting ready to say that, like Al, I have done a lot of coaching and instructing. Over my career, that's predominantly what I do. But I don't just do it with respect to Agile or working with organizations. I get an opportunity to do it. Oh, I'm gonna have to change. Steve, why don't you take over for a minute? I'm gonna have to adjust my.
Okay, good. Well, Mr. Murphy is an excellent coach, as we see, because he forces you to improvise. I like to reflect on what Al just said about that asking questions, because this makes me think, guess what, about Goldratt's The Goal, the business novel, which I hope everyone has read. If not, please do read The Goal. It's mind-opening. What has this to do with coaching? Well, one key figure in the novel is this gentleman called Jonah, an old professor that the protagonist is always chasing to get his wisdom, his advice. But the funny thing is that Jonah never gives advice. He just asks questions. And the novel kicks off with Alex Rogo, who is so proud that he has installed new machines, new robots that increase productivity amazingly. And the first meeting he has with Yona will ask him, well, has this improved anything in the bottom line? Do you have more revenue? Are you saving operating expenses? Are you saving investments? And the protagonist was like, well, we are producing more widgets. Yes, but what about the results? So that kicked off all the thinking processes in the head of Alex Rogo, which then developed in the rest of the novel. So the very first significant episode of the novel is a form of coaching, as this Socratic method where you don't tell, you ask. Of course, you need to know, and maybe that is one of the answers to the questions of what does an Agile coach, or any coach for that matter, need to know. He needs to know what questions to ask. And that is a huge topic. Those questions will shape the entire direction that the coachee will take thereafter. So that I would put up as one of the points. Now, what questions does the Agile coach need to know about?
Joshua, it looks like you're there and your battery's okay.
I'm
so
back.
Why don't you talk while you're back?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when it comes to coaching styles and knowing, and that's definitely something that a coach needs to know, how people learn, and also what they might need to get started and be able to get going in the right direction. So absolutely asking questions, getting to the point where you're kind of leading them to their discovery of what might work and what might not, and also letting them make some mistakes, right? Because those are good learning opportunities without introducing a lot of risk. What I was also getting to say before I had my little power interruption was that I do coaching also in one of the hobbies. So one of the hobbies, or my main hobbies, I race sports cars, and I also teach driver coaching, driver instruction, and driver coaching. And there's kind of two components of that. There's somebody has a sports car, they want to learn how to drive on a racetrack. That's like our driver education events. And then somebody who's got some experience and wants to go wheel-to-wheel racing. And I can say that is an environment where the results come very quickly. And some of the basic things you do need to guide initially are things like keep your eyes up. Don't be looking right in front of the car. You have to keep your eyes up, field of vision, see what's unfolding, look where the corner workers are at, see if they're communicating you via flags, or being really tensed up. You've got a lot of adrenaline and your hands are clenched. Well, you have very little input, or the fine inputs you can put to the steering wheel if the car starts to move around a little bit underneath them. So very similar to with teams, or very similar with leadership, is I too feel very strongly that asking questions is a necessary approach for coaching, but there are times where you do need to get somebody going. And I think giving some initial direction is also important.
I want to something while I think Steve was talking hit me. A ways back, I wrote an article, and I actually put it in the chat. What to say or what to do when someone just doesn't get it. And it was intended in a particular situation, but I realized how I think gives a good guide on coaching. The situation was this. Sometimes I've run into kind of obstinate people, or at least it felt like they were obstinate. Actually, that's part of the trick, is don't hold them that way. But I'm talking to somebody, they're just not getting it. They might even sound belligerent, and I was like, oh my God, no, I can't get anything done with this person. And what do you do in that situation? And one of the things I've learned as both a trainer and a coach, more in training, because in training you get thrown in with people very quickly, and they have their own agenda because it's a quick workshop. What I realize is you always have to treat whoever you're talking to as if they're really nice, really wanting to learn, well-behaved, trying to do the best they can. I don't care how they're showing up. I'm talking about you got to come from they really want to learn. So then you can ask yourself, how would somebody who's smart, intelligent, and wants to learn, why would they behave this way? Okay, now, the truth is sometimes they're just a jerk. But, that's happened very infrequently. In the thousands of people I've interacted with, I've had that happen maybe twice, 3, 4 times, but not more than a handful. Almost always, they're not. Almost always, they're just looking at the situation from a bad perspective. Or it's kind of I push the button, a personal button, so to speak. But either way, I can have some control. When you're coaching, you lose control the moment you blame them as being obstinate. I've learned that. So it's like you act as if, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. Act as if they're motivated. So I actually thought about this, and I asked this question, and I think it's because they're looking at things I'm not looking at. Like this person, he was thinking weak cohesion is a good thing. And I'm thinking, no, that's bad. So there are some things people look at they shouldn't be looking at, some things they don't see that they should be seeing. And if you can identify what those are, and you usually can, because they usually will tell you while they're talking and explaining their problem, you can hear where they're coming from. And if you're not sure, just ask them questions. Like when he said he likes everything all together, I said, oh, so you like weak cohesion where everything is unrelated, everything related is all in one class? He said, yeah. And I said, well, why do you like that? He'll tell you. People like to express their beliefs. Just ask without any judgment. So that is something I use when I'm in a tough situation where I'm not making any progress. But it's the same process. Even when people are wanting coaching, it's like, well, what do they see? What do they not see? You want to ask that. And this is a dialogue. It's a Socratic dialogue. It's best to ask questions and do it in a non-judgmental way, and then have a conversation with them. And what's also very critical is when you have the conversation with them, you don't have the conversation with them like you're right and they're not. You have the conversation like it's an equal inquiry. You learn more. Let's say you are right. Well, great. Then having the conversation doesn't hurt. You'll end up discovering you're right. Actually, you don't learn anything from that, but you might be wrong. And then you'll discover something because they have a better idea. Or maybe it's just a miscommunication. You'll learn how to communicate better. The point is, you have to have a conversation without an intention on the outcome except to discover something. And that's what a coach, I think, needs to do, is that's how you interact. But it's not like you're just stepping back. If you see something wrong or something you think is wrong, then you have to take and get to the root of it. Either you're wrong, they're wrong, something misunderstood. But you don't just say, well, I'll let them discover it. It's not my job. It's theirs. I'm just a facilitator. See, I actually think you're not doing your job as a coach. And actually, I'd like Steve and Joshua to talk about this, because what a coach is really up for debate. And I hear this all the time, and I believe it comes somewhat from the Scrum community, because in the Scrum community, it's you do this, this, this. There's all this what you do, but there's little objective and little theory behind it. So you have to follow these practices, and then you don't want to be belligerent. So it's like we go back to the Scrum guide. But I'm talking about how do you look to resolve something based on principles and theory. And I think when you have that, you can learn a shared model of things. And one last point, because it just tied in. In the shared model, it's important that you have the same intention that they have, because sometimes people have different intentions. That's not necessarily bad. Anyway, I'll let you two chime in now. I said a lot there.
Well, I think now one point there is what is a coach? This industry, as we know, is full of certifications of all sorts. But even the coaching profession, as such, has a number of very demanding certifications and qualifications. So one question is now, all those who are acting as agile coaches, do they have that sort of background? Do they have the preparation, the knowledge that a professional coach has? I doubt that. I think that many might have started off as Scrum Masters, and one day they find themselves to handle more than one team, and all of a sudden they are agile coaches. But really, they don't have the knowledge that a professionally trained coach has. So I think that is a distinction to be made. There are coaches and there are coaches. Now, how do you distinguish between one and the other? Well, one way, of course, is to see if they have these qualifications. Another one is just to look at their experience, cases. Do they have testimonials? Do they have people who can vet for them and tell stories, use cases? So The choice of a coach is clearly important, as you said, Alec. No, they're not on the same page. They don't share the same intention. Well, it's lost time for everyone. And in that like due diligence process of when you pick an agile coach, make sure that they also know their stuff. I think that's the key element.
Yeah, and that ties in with this comment that Michael put in, right? The other dangers of coaching is fake knowledge or pretending to know. And if you're in an organization and you are looking to have an initiative to, again, either begin an agile journey transformation, improve the one you're on, you're in a stagnated one, whatever. And how do you know? Like, how would you know if you're not very experienced in with an agile way of working and coaching? And one of the things that I feel companies would get tremendous benefit from is at least have one, engage with one very well recognized, somebody that is absolutely been a coach. It's proven, based on their experience, and they can help you identify the additional coaches you might need. Right? I mean, that's one of the other things, because Steve, I completely agree with, you start off, you're a Scrum Master. Again, some Scrum Master certifications are more challenging than others to achieve. Right? There are some that are quite easy, and you're a Scrum Master and you're certified. Do you have any experience? Do you have any experience being on a team that's used Scrum or used an Agile approach? And then again, how do you coach people to do that? And being a superstar player doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make a really good coach as well. I mean, sometimes yes, but sometimes no. So that's something that I think is also important to have the hiring people that are bringing making an investment by bringing somebody or a number of people in, is to know that.
Yeah, that's a good point about the superstars often aren't good coaches. It has to do more with not how good they are at the job as much as how good they are at relating to other people. It's interesting. If you look at a lot of sports coaches, you find that some of the best coaches were only mediocre players. They had played, so they understood the game, but their physical skills weren't as good as their actual abilities. Now, there are, of course, exceptions like Jackson, the Chicago Bulls and, New York teams. He was both a great player and a great coach.
And you were a great team member and an excellent coach.
Well, I'm not sure I was I was really good by myself. So there's a story there to say. So I moved from doing a lot of software development when I moved out to Seattle. I decided, well, I'll just take a contracting gig for a little while. And that's how I got into coaching. So I became a coach in '96, and I was the worst one available. I mean, I got lucky that the person I was responsible to coach did not give any number of HR complaints to get me fired, because she would have been justified. And I noticed this, actually. I said, Al, you were just being such an asshole here. And I looked at why, because he's smart, he's nice, and you're just not treating her nicely. And I got that I was really, back then, I was like afraid of she wasn't going to get it. And out of the fear, I got angry, because usually under anger, there's always fear. And I knew that. So I realized, Al, you got this fear, you got to get rid of it. And I did some soul searching, and it took me about 3 or 4 years before I became a decent coach. And then I'm a really good coach now. But, back from '96 to 2001, you didn't want me as a coach. But so there is some aspect of that. And I think you need to have this personal way of empathy and being calm and patient. And I'm not even always that way now, but I'm actually pretty good. But what hit me, and now I'm thinking of losing the train of thought by having that sideways thing, so like if you're really good as a doer, that doesn't mean you're a great coach. And I forgot the other thought I was going to say, so I'm going to hand it back, but I will come back. I'm sure it's going to hit me again what it was.
Well, yeah. So one other thing I'll add in that, if you're, in a position, again, how do you, what should an Agile coach know? Well, you're not always going to have these moments to be able to have, something to coach on. I mean, you need to be able to observe. And again, it's observe and nudge a little and provide a little guidance, ask questions, give a little guidance here and there. And that's one of the things also that, sometimes I don't see in some of the environments that we help support is that as well.
Yeah,
Did you remember what it was, Al?
I did remember what it was.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because people know me for razzing on, some Scrum coaches and things, but I actually got an insight that helps me understand and be a bit more sympathetic. So the way I do coaching is I watch what people are doing, and I've learned a lot about, we talked about what should an Agile coach know, and one of the things I think an Agile coach needs to know is what I call the factors for effective value streams. This is like things like it's better work on small things. You want to remove delays. Working beyond capacity causes waste. And this is part of the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant Workshop and the Value Stream Management microcred thing I'm working on is how do you know you've got a good value stream? And if you don't know that, it's like not knowing what side of the road you're driving on. It's very dangerous. So some of the things the coach needs to know, these are some specific things. And some of this is a combination of theory and practice. And it's clear what the objective is, and it's clear what theory you're violating when you do. And it occurred to me as I was talking about how I did this, what do you do when somebody doesn't get it? It occurred to me that if I'm a Scrum coach and all I know is the Scrum Guide, which has a lot of how, like what you do, and a lot of who, but it has very little of the objective, very little theory behind it. And don't send me a note saying, have I read the Scrum Guide? Yes, I've read this 2020 Scrum Guide 5 times at least. And yes, I know it says it's based on empiricism and lean thinking. And I would say, no, it's not based on lean thinking. It's too inconsistent with lean thinking to be based on it. There have been some lean practices thrown in. That'd be like saying a daily stand-up in a waterfall makes it Scrum. It doesn't. It's just a practice. Lean practices just make Scrum have some better practices. It doesn't change the thinking. But if you don't understand the objective, like why do I have cross-functional teams? Why do I have iterations? Why do I have retrospections? And understand the theory behind all those, all you have left when you're confronting with somebody who's not doing Scrum is to say you're not doing Scrum. Hey, here's what it says in the Scrum Guide. And if you have an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish with cross-functional teams and what you're trying to accomplish with iterations, and you understand the theory behind it, then you could come up with different practices that give you a better result for the situation you're in. So dogma is somewhat a natural result, I think, of that. And I've said that before, but it just got clear to me that if I'm a coach and I've got to say something because something's going wrong, and you're gonna have to resort back to the guide as the answer, and it may not be the answer.
Well, yeah. So how many coaches could we ask if they know the difference between single loop learning and double loop learning? Right? Do they know that we're not just focused on the guide or the initial way we've started? We're going to challenge everything, right? We're always looking to see, no matter what it is, can we make an improvement? Is there something that we can see a better optimization with?
So I'll do like a couple of reflections here, and maybe the second one will be no, I must have one of those out of the box moments, so I will get to that. But no, first a reflection on what I sense from this conversation is that coaching is based on respect for people, both ways. That is essential. So, excuse me. So that is essential, and in that question, what an Agile coach needs to know, one might also look at the Agile coach and what are the needs of the Agile coach. So if you're engaging a coach, maybe try to put yourself in his or her shoes, and she walks into your organization. What do they see? What do they see? And what would you like them to know? And what can you tell them immediately without them having to be there 6 months before discovering that, oh, we have a policy that was established by the founder's grandmother and it's never been questioned. So things like that you know about your organization, let them know as soon as you engage them. It can create a lot of shortcuts. Now, the controversial, out of the box moment, I will question: are coaches necessary? Are they necessary? Maybe in virtue of how the industry has been developing and structured in the last 20 years, yes. but are there other ways to attain the same results without the need of coaching hundreds and hundreds of people? I know this now has implications in terms of business models, but if I am a business owner and I have the option of engaging coaches that are on the ground for months and months and go around the entire company on the one side, while on the other side there might be another sort of solution where the essential knowledge and attitudes and behaviors that are facilitated by the coach can be realized in a fraction of the time, then that's something that as a business owner I would like to consider. And of course, here I refer to my team flow, because team flow is not based on coaching, if nothing else, because I'm not a coach, as I said before. Never got any sort of qualification there. But the essence of team flow is this notion of mental models that facilitate decision making. And the key thing is that these mental models have to be like implanted into the brains of all players, from the CEO to the latest junior hire, as I often say. And that can be done very, very quickly. And once those mental models are in place, then decisions happen all across the organization in a way that are consistent, coherent, and go in the same direction. So the unity of purpose, which I proclaim is so important. So from my perspective, there are ways to achieve what coaching aims for, but with more high performing ways. Now, I don't mean to say that coaches are not necessary. I'm just saying there are other alternatives which one might want to consider.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm gonna have a slightly different counter to that, but very similar in that could an organization, could an area benefit from a coach? Maybe, maybe not. Or how do they really need it? And all the options we might have to make the progress we're looking for. But one of the things that I think also we see a lot is we see that we have these coaches that are embedded with a team or part of a team or part of an area, and they're there forever. And why are they there forever? Well, are they actually doing what we would expect a professional coach to do, right? Are they providing enough coaching to, again, help improve, help the team members, help the organization improve the results they're delivering? And if so, at some point they move on to another area of the organization, or maybe they move on to another organization in general, and we don't need the coach any longer. So that's something else that I think from an investment perspective, it's like, well, I can get this coach, or I can get 5 of these coaches for the same price as this other more experienced coach. But are you really going to get something for that investment? Or are you just going to have another person that maybe they're not coaching, maybe they're just taking on work as a team member, or maybe they're never really doing the pairing with some of the team members to again grow them in their experience. They're just the default person that is handling all of the facilitation and all of the sort of process related things. And that's not what I feel coaching should be at all.
No, I agree with you. There are many instances where coaches are just contractors in disguise, so to say. They fill a seat or an FTE, a headcount, and they have the title of coach, but they're not acting as a coach. So what would like a super coach be like? Well, I think that a coach that really makes a difference can act on one team, and then that team becomes so outstanding that in and by its own performance and behavior and way of being becomes a role model for the rest of the organization. The rest will look up to what that team is doing, and what they have learned will expand through the organization in an organic manner, in going through the walls almost. In that case, I think the coach has really, really made a difference. Otherwise, it's just like giving notions and knowledge. I mean, I can use Wikipedia to get to the knowledge, and I'm not coached because of that.
Yeah. So let's see. John asks a interesting question, right? What metrics do you use to show you're adding value as a coach? I won't maybe. I'll share what I won't maybe say they're metrics, but some of the indicators that either if I'm doing coaching or I'm helping some of the coaches that are doing the coaching at the team level. And it's things like, do we have some of the team members that are doing, if they're using, say, an iterative approach, and one of the things Al mentioned, right, the daily stand-up, the daily coordination meeting, do we see that there's a rotation with that? Do we see that the coach isn't being asked to facilitate that, to kick it off and kind of own it, right? Because that's a pretty easy one. Do we see that the team members on their own are looking for options in their way of working? And I'll relate back to Discipline Agile and the process goals and the options we've got for the decision points. Is there reflection on how well things are going and what could we try next? Or is it always a coach that's having to identify that or ask questions that drive to that? So those are some of the things from an indicator perspective to see if people are learning and putting these things in and owning them versus, again, that's what the coach does. No, that's not what the coach should do.
So, this is really an interesting question of the metrics that can show this impact. And I would say, well, at this point, I refer now to the fourth flow of team flow, which is psychological flow. And even if it is like in the domain of the, let's say, the emotions and feelings, there are ways to have metrics that can like measure to what degree the psychological development of individuals or teams are like before and after the cure. Like when you take the magic pill for losing weight, you see the before and after picture. Before I was like that, and then I'm like an athlete. So that kind of picture can be drawn in terms of metrics of psychological profiles. That is a huge topic, but maybe we need an entire episode on that one.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah. Here's it.
Can you all hear me?
Yep, we can't hear you, Al.
Okay. As I said, I moved up here. I had this big UPS shipment. A lot of my stuff just came. I knew it was going to happen in the middle of this, but I wanted to answer one of John's other questions because I think it actually illustrates another thing about coaching. And even though we were talking a bit about team coaching, this is very germane. So I was at a client. They brought me in. Wasn't a big company. I think the development group is about 150 people, maybe a little less. They brought me in to do tech coaching, design patterns, and back around 2003, 2004. And I'm training them on a design pattern class. And they said, Al, while you're here, could you talk to our executives? And I said, sure. So I have a meeting with about 8 of their executives, the CEO, all the VPs, whatever. And one of the things I knew, these guys built some land security things. And one of the things they did was they built all these features. And I asked the director of marketing, he's having this conversation because I've been talking about how they should be working on, I was telling him a little bit about Agile. And he said, well, we need all the features. And I said, okay. And now I don't know, I'm just in here. They're their company. I don't know them. So I just asked questions. He says, well, we need all the features. And I say, okay. So you do understand that. And I asked him why first. And he says, well, we need all the features because people look at our product versus the other products and they won't buy it unless they have all the features. And I said, you do know that having all the features slows you down though, adds more stuff to support. And he said, yeah, because I didn't know how much he knew. As obvious a question as that is, not everybody really knows that. So I say, okay, so does everybody use all the features? And he says, no, but I won't get in the door unless I have all the features. I said, do they eventually learn that they don't use all the features? And they say, well, yeah, they learn they don't need them all. But he goes back again to the original they need it to sell it. So I said, okay, so let me get this straight. So what you're doing is you're competing based on you have all the features, and people need to look at all those features to buy the system. And you know that it slows you down to give future enhancements by having all the features, even though not everybody uses them. He said, yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, let me ask you this. Would you rather be the company that has all the features that not everybody uses, most people don't use, or would you rather be the company that has the features you need and can build the features you need in the future faster? So I didn't tell him that's what he should be doing, although I kind of thought he should. So I'm going to say that again. I asked him, are you a company, do you want to be a company that has all the features even though nobody uses them all, or would you rather be a company that has all the features people need and you can add the features they'll need in the future faster? And you could see he had never thought about this before. So this is kind of what I mean, but you have to look and have empathy and see where they are, and then ask a question that lets them decide. It turns out they did decide. They changed their entire strategy on that basis of that question, because he had not put it together, because he didn't understand Agile enables you to go faster with new things and that there was a cost to having everything. Okay, that's it.
So we did have one other question. Let's see if we can get that one back up. Do you have any thoughts on the relative difficulty of coaching for Agile teams within organizations that don't support coaching elsewhere? Thoughts on key benefits, essentially the case for change. And yeah, so I'll chime in on this, and Steve, then I'll ask if you have anything you want to add. But yes, when especially where we see organizations that are moving from a traditional serial sequential approach, whatever we want to call it, and they want to begin a very different way of working. Right? They are going to need support. They'll need some training. They will need some coaching, and being able to paint the picture of why we need somebody that's got this experience that we don't currently have. And it would be very difficult for us to figure out. Maybe we could without any support, but maybe not. And how some of the people in the organization and maybe contractors we've had for a long-term perspective have been doing the same thing for so long, trying to get them to do something so different requires support to be able to do that. Steve, I know you said with TameFlow, it's not based on you, for instance, you being a coach, but clearly there are some techniques that I think you could probably share for how you accomplish
yes,
that.
No, that's very interesting, because it goes to one of the big topics of the psychological flow, because we have organizations that typically, because of historical reasons, and because of customary management practices, are very much task oriented, do stuff, right? While when we come to the Agile part, or I would at this point refrain from using the word Agile, but just say more generically collaborative knowledge work, then we are also, in addition to the task orientation, we also need to take into account the people orientation, because we're dealing with people, so needs of people. And there, well, you see an evaporating cloud. There are two branches of an evaporating cloud with two apparently conflicting needs. Now, those are psychological dimensions. Now, the orientation, how deep is it? We can measure that, but we can also use the evaporating cloud to resolve those kinds of conflicts. And there you will see that at a certain point, it is no longer an issue of task versus people, but it becomes more an issue of individual needs of people who are on the different sides of this spectrum. And maybe you have some aggressive defensive styles, or others which are like more passive but still defensive, and others which are more constructive. So if you can map out how individuals are in those dimensions, coaching would also bring them to develop their weak spots. And here we go back to theory constraints. Now, find your weak spots. And one thing is, in your in your psychology, what are your weak spots? Can you act on them? A good coach could find these points, could measure them, and could bring you to develop them. So if you are oriented towards tasks, but you are introducing agile or collaborative knowledge work, as I say, into the organization, maybe you need to become more people-oriented. So how can we do that? Are you aware that that is an area that you need personal development? And once you do that individually, can you do it with the team as well? And once you're done with the team, with your unit, and then the organization. So this is a very, very deep topic. And now with my 4 flows, I always start with the operational flow, which is the value stream, basically. And it's the easiest one to deal with, because everyone has a value stream. Everyone has to move stuff from order to delivery. But then we have like the financial flow, a bit more difficult, but it's still numbers. Then you have the informational flow. Okay, that's very fluffy. You don't see information. You need to model it. And then at the top you have the psychological flow. That is really the most difficult one to handle. But I use metrics there as well, and I resolve like these kinds of issues. If you have like task orientation versus people orientation, how do you get all those things together?
I want to comment on what Brian said. I think that's a good comment. I'm not sure I totally agree with it, but it brings up some really, really good issues, which is, because I was just kind of doing a quick flashback. Where people are at their level of, I hate to use the word maturity, but how advanced they are or not advanced they are, how much learning they need to do. Actually, that does have a big role in the way you coach. I mean, I've gone into a lot of teams, a lot of companies where they were new to Agile and they really needed coaching, and they got a lot of benefit. I mean, I kind of talked to them about some basic stuff, and I go into a place like that in a different way than where there's a advancement already. Now, when I say a different way, actually, both cases, it's total respect. Both cases, it's, hey, I've got some experience. You know your company better than me. Let's work together. I always do that regardless. But it's what I'm going to coach them in. So if they're new to Agile, then I'll coach them in the basics of what they should be looking at. This again, what do you tell somebody doesn't get it? Well, what are the things they don't know that they should be looking at? Like, let's look at short, frequent learnings. Let's create visibility, some basic things. And I do it, again, through questions and things. But the level of knowledge they have, and also the openness of moving forward. I've worked with some companies where they just don't want to change. I've actually worked with companies, they wanted to change so much, it was scary. I mean, seriously, we had one client that we had in the statement of work, we were going to go in and give them a couple of days of training on how to do Agile across the organization. It was about 280 developers. And when we got there, their boss said, no, we're going to actually just do this planning and lay this all out just like that. And we were like in shock. These guys didn't know Agile, and we had 4 hours or something. And that was a company, they liked change. They just wanted to know what to do. So they said, Al, tell us what to do. And we had been working with them enough where we were clear what was needed, and the management had agreed to it. And we had a massive success on that. So the culture, where they are, those all affect both what you give them, the pace at which you can give it to them, and the scope, what you can cover.
So Al, you've mentioned a couple of the factors for the effective or efficient value streams, and what are some of the things that we would want to, person coming in with enough Agile experience, enough coaching experience, and things like items being worked on are small, and how to continue to find out what is the smallest next thing that could be done to add value. Some of the other things are, the value creation structure, right? What can they be looking at that would be able to change the way the team is, currently has been formed, or, what we might look at in the future? Oh no, I see there's something you just put up. Yeah, so looks like you were dropping in some of the factors there. But yeah, those are just some of the things that I think are important for a coach to understand and be able to foster an environment to do that, as well as how can we get quick feedback, right? It's not just feedback from the product owner, feedback from the stakeholders. How are we getting the team members to get feedback from each other quicker, right? And then taking action on that feedback.
I think there is another aspect that since we are on the topic of coaching, uh, needs to be at least hinted at, because it's not something that Agile coaches engage in. But when you are proposing organizational changes, which now have a huge impact, at a certain point you will be dealing with the top executives. So there is a whole area that is executive coaching, which lives like in a separate world. It has nothing to do with Agile, but the intent, the purpose is always the same. That to find a more balanced lifestyle for the executives, and at the same time perform better on in the office at work. There, I think there is an opportunity to address the executive coaching in such manner that it becomes more compatible with the changes that might be going on and might be facilitated on the ground with the Agile coaches. Those are bridges that I don't see anywhere being implemented, but somehow with my mental models, because I want to instill them in the minds of all people in the organization, I do get some of those effects. Of course, I repeat again, I'm not a coach, so I'm not engaging in executive coaching, but I have had cases where I have myself suggested to the CEO, hey, you need to get yourself in shape, get an executive coach, go to the gym, keep the diet in line.
Magic pill.
Don't take magic pills. Go lift weights, whatever. So we have those connections to make.
Yeah. Well, I know it looks like we're getting a little bit close on time. Al, any parting thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, it's funny because I was also thinking this is all great what we've said, but there are always exceptions. And a couple that came to mind are when something's urgent or just really obvious. And one of them is kind of a funny one. It's an American football story. So my dad was really, really smart about football. I love American football, and there's a lot more to it than most people realize. And we were in Miami, so we were Miami Hurricane fans. This was back in the 60s. And we were watching the Hurricanes, and the quarterback and the halfback were always fumbling. There used to be 2 or 3, and I don't mean fumbling when they were hit. They were just fumbling on the handoffs. And my dad noticed what was going on. I mean, he told me like immediately, the quarterback sometimes, when you hand the ball off, you're all running around. And you should always put the ball in the same place, like about the belly button and the stomach, so they can just grab it. And sometimes the quarterback handed it off chest high. Sometimes he handed it off more down at the groin. It was just ridiculous. My dad was like, tell him to hand it off at the belt level. And about 3 games in, there was this little blurb in the paper that said the offensive coach noticed a technical problem with the quarterback handing it off. And the very next game, they handed it off always at the belt buckle. The fumbling stopped. So a little praise for my dad. But the point is, sometimes people are just doing something wrong, and you just have to say, this is not good. And then maybe have a conversation about it. But you can't take weeks and weeks to figure out how to change some things. And then the other thing is sometimes things are dangerous. I was remembering this video I saw years ago. They had this device that used X-rays to help fit your shoes. If you think that's insane, it's insane. I mean, people were getting cancer and all sorts of stuff from this because people didn't know X-rays were dangerous back then. So if you have a dangerous situation, or if you have a technical thing that's causing problems, everything I've said, still be empathetic, still ask questions, but the urgency level changes. And that has to be considered. So it's not like, I can't do this. If you find yourself, I can't do this because of that. Alan said this. Well, that probably is not right. You got to look at urgency and danger. And that's the parting thought for me.
And I'll add something that's kind of in line with that. I saw early on, there was a comment that, death by 1,000 questions. And that's something I believe that, asking questions, giving little nudges, definitely an effective coaching technique. But sometimes when you see something that is just wrong, and it's going to continue to be, you as a coach, you've got to step in and say, stop doing that for these purposes.
Exactly.
Steve, your final thoughts?
Well, yes. Now, sometimes the coach or the leader has to step in with the solution. I mean, the story of Herbie, just to remain on my theme, was of that kind, because at a certain point, Alex, the team lead, was just observing this line of scouts and scratching his head. He came up with, well, first one and then a second solution. But how did he get the team to do so? He told them, no, you do like this. And then it worked. So sometimes, yes, the direct approach is necessary. But in general, no, unless there is that situation of burning platform, urgency, the alarms are off, well, I would still tend to lead with the Socratic questions, because oftentimes people just do not see. They just need someone to help them, pull up the eyelids so they can see. And I think that's what Herbie would say.
Well, on that note, I'll thank everyone for attending today and all of the great comments and thoughts that were in the chat. And we will see you next week.
Take care. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Till
Bye.
next week, friends of Herbie.